What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G and the Cricket Dream 5G. So let's get right into it. So with the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, we're getting a 6.6-inch 90Hz PLS LCD display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 400, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. With the Cricket Dream 5G, we're getting a 6.82-inch LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 263, and a 20.5:9 aspect ratio. So in general, for what they are, both phones do have pretty good displays. On one hand, with the Cricket Dream 5G, despite the image quality being more mediocre at 6.82 inches versus 6.6, it definitely is a bit larger. So if you're doing stuff like reading, for example, where the image quality per se isn't really super important, but maybe you want things to be a bit larger and easier to see, then in that case, the Cricket Dream 5G will have an advantage there. And with the 20.5:9 aspect ratio versus 20:9, it also has a slightly taller and more narrow form factor, and this is going to allow you to fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. So definitely something to consider. With the A14 5G though, the image quality looks so much better with a 1080p resolution versus, again, only 720p. So if you are doing stuff like watching videos or maybe playing games or looking at photos and you want a really nice looking image, the A14 5G will have a huge advantage. And in addition to this, with a 90Hz refresh rate versus only 60Hz with the Cricket Dream 5G, the movement on the screen is going to be a bit faster and smoother. So in general, the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G is going to feel a bit more premium to use. Now for storage, both phones have 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion. So on one hand, I personally consider this more of a bare minimum, and I would definitely not recommend a phone that has less. But that being said, for the average user, as long as you're mindful of what you're putting on your phone and you're not constantly downloading all kinds of apps and games and stuff like that, the storage we're getting with these phones is going to be perfectly fine for you. But of course, if you are more of a power user, you might want to consider something a bit higher end that has more storage. For security features, both phones have fingerprint scanners. With the A14 5G, it's right here on the power key, and with the Cricket Dream 5G, it's right here on the back. And keep in mind, the A14 5G has Face Unlock, whereas unfortunately, the Cricket Dream 5G doesn't. But starting with the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, let's give the fingerprint scanners a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Cricket Dream 5G. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see there, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, remember, with the A14 5G, you are getting Face Unlock, so you can use that too if you want. Whereas with the Cricket Dream 5G, unfortunately, this phone doesn't have Face Unlock. For the cameras, with the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, we got a 13 megapixel selfie camera. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. With the Cricket Dream 5G, we got another 13 megapixel selfie camera, pretty much the same kind of thing. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So as far as features go, the Cricket Dream 5G does have a bit of an advantage since this phone does have an ultra wide camera, and again, unfortunately with the A14 5G, despite having a macro camera, this phone does not have an ultra wide camera. So if you do want that feature, you might want to go with the Cricket Dream 5G. But when it comes to photo quality, I do think the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G has a huge advantage, being able to take much better photos. Now to give you an idea of what it can do, here's some pictures taken with the A14 5G, and yeah, definitely for what it is, the photo quality here is really good. So if you don't really care that much about an ultra wide camera, but you're taking a lot of regular photos, maybe using portrait mode for something like Instagram for example, in that kind of situation, I do think the A14 5G is going to be a great choice, and with this phone you are going to get a really good experience, because as you can see, despite not having a ton of features, it does take really good photos overall. Now here's some pictures taken with the Cricket Dream 5G, and for what it is, I do think they are pretty good, but at the same time not quite as good as the A14 5G. So in general, I'd say if you're not super concerned about the photo quality, and you just want it to be at least decent, but you do want an ultra wide camera, then the Cricket Dream 5G still might be a better choice. But of course, when it comes to something like which pictures are better, this is going to be pretty subjective, so make of all this what you will. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, with the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the Exynos 1330 processor. With the Cricket Dream 5G, this phone also has 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700. So overall, when it comes to performance, these phones are actually pretty similar, which is not too surprising, considering they're pretty much in the same price range. I don't think one is really significantly faster than the other. In general, for more basic activities like web browsing, social media, watching videos, and some light mobile gaming and stuff like that, either phone is going to be perfectly fine. And again, I don't really think either is significantly significantly faster than the other. Now I did run benchmark tests on both phones using Geekbench 5, and here are the results I got. So again, as you can see here, really similar scores. Technically, the multi-core score with the A14 5G is a little bit higher, and technically, the Cricket Dream 5G does have a higher single core score, but you get the picture. They're really pretty much around the same. So when you're actually using the phones, you're not really going to see a significant performance difference between the two. That being said though, again, for more basic activities, they are going to be perfectly fine. So as long as you're not a super heavy user and you're not expecting like flagship level performance, then with either phone, I do think you will get a good experience. For the batteries, with the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, this phone has a 5000 mAh battery, whereas the Cricket Dream 5G has a 4750 mAh battery. So between the two, by a pretty slight margin, the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G does have an advantage, but honestly, it's not really that much of a difference. So keep in mind, the Cricket Dream 5G does have really good battery life too. And I've had this phone for quite a while. I'm surprised I'm even still making videos about it for that matter. And in my experience, this phone can go for quite a while without charging. But of course, between the two, if you do want slightly longer battery life, the A14 5G will still have an advantage. That being said though, with the Cricket Dream 5G, keep in mind, this phone is actually one of the few entry-level phones that actually has wireless charging. So if you do want that feature, definitely keep this in mind too. For the software, the A14 5G has a huge advantage, getting Android 13 right out of the box, and knowing Samsung software support. With this phone, you can also expect to get several other major updates in the future. On the other hand, with the Cricket Dream 5G, unfortunately this phone only has Android 11, and I'm like 99% sure it's not even going to be getting Android 12, let alone Android 13. So honestly, if the software matters to you at all, I would definitely go with the Samsung. In addition to this, both phones do have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, keep in mind you can do that with either phone no problem. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, I would say the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G is the better device here. Despite the performance being roughly the same, the A14 5G has a much nicer looking display. The photo quality with the camera is quite a bit better. The battery is also a bit larger if you even want to count that. The software is much newer, and it has much better software support. That being said though, if you want an ultra-wide camera, wireless charging, a slightly larger display, and you're okay with having an older software, then the Cricket Dream 5G is still going to be a perfectly fine choice too. But this concludes my comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G and the Cricket Dream 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description where I will be linking to several other videos about each of them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.